Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back, Chasing Legends. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, go to our About section or our website at www.legendofsuperstitionmountains.com. I'm going to leave the rest of the stuff out of there and get going this week. So, we've been through episode 3. Got 3 episodes in the can. You just watched us, if you were paying attention this Friday, walk off from the Spiral Staircase Mine. And everybody's going to have a lot of questions, and I'll answer a few of those. But it is a curious thing. I mean, you just keep looking at it. And one of the things we have to do is check off boxes. There's unlikely things, improbable things, but you still have to keep the box there of what people say it is. So from all the people we have, there's the people that believe it could be Hohokum, Aztec, Mayan. There's possibilities of the Masons or the Church of Latter-day Saints, which I'll explain later in this. There's various different indigenous peoples, the Pima, the Hopi, the Navajo could be involved in some way. It could be always, who was interfering or out there. It was, a group from some government entity out there. Archaeologically, was the U.S. military involved? Remember Henry Burns and his lights in the sky over in that area. And there were some people that said they believed the U.S. military was in there in the 40s or 50s. Then we get to the Knights Templar and people there. There's Templar symbols they believe in the mountains. And then we even go further with the Vikings. For people who don't know, you can always look it up. Down in Tucson, there was someone who supposedly discovered Viking artifacts, these lead crosses and swords and so forth. Those have been carbon dated, and that's all off the board. They're considered fakes and a hoax. But the problem is, anything, even if you prove something out and say, well, that doesn't exist, that people still will use it. There wasn't a pterodactyl that was killed in Arizona. Grand Canyon government's not hiding the Egyptian stuff. We covered that in the rabbit hole thing of where some of those stories originated and from various people. Most of the people wrote science fiction novels. And so you kind of get it. But we have to always keep the box there and check it and say, okay, why would this not be possible? Is there anything that would lead to this? And of course, there's always the favorite of everyone, the extraterrestrial spaceship crashing and some sort of which brings the military into it. And there's technology and so forth. So some of the things we did was definitely soil samples. And I wanted them tested. Is there anything in the soil that would have shown some presence of anything, not just extraterrestrial or anything, but if there was a long-term camp there or something, some sort of contamination or something went long-term. There was nothing there. We didn't find anything possible. The other thing being is we did a lot of stuff with the EMFs, and I wanted to always check in and around there to see if there was any variation. Nothing. It was pretty close to flatlining out. And it rarely, unless we got towards a piece of equipment, we never saw much movement. And we'll continue to do that each time. Now, you don't always see it on camera. You'll see me holding my phone out or holding something out doing that during the process. But a lot of times, you're not seeing it. Those 3 episodes, do you really need to see 12 episodes of us making 2 trips? Because that's what it would be like. It's just, you get to see kind of when things happen, or when we're trying to explain, or when we were talking about something we thought was finding of interest. And the same is for the camera drops. No matter how many camera drops we do and so forth, and the still photographs and stuff we get, you get kind of an idea of where we think, okay, this is the best representation of this. It's the same reason when the people say use a drone, and I've had the people say use LiDAR. Why? We can see everything, and you can see everything with a drone. The LiDAR is not going to make a difference out there in the desert. But even with the drone, what's it going to tell us? Nothing I couldn't see from Google Earth or Google Maps or any satellite imagery or aerial imagery of any other type. There's no reason to do it other than have a fancy camera angle. It's not covering more ground. You need to be physically in the area you're working on, looking at what you're going, picking up rocks, looking at things. And it's painstaking, it's slow, so it can be 8 or 10 hours of something, and then what we do is condense it down. So that kind of gives an explanation, and we covered. But today I want to kind of cover where we're at and where our heads were at that time, because I have the advantage of looking back. At the time, there was a number of theories we kept thinking. Frank definitely thought they might have dug it from the inside out, which was difficult to me, because why didn't they just dig straight up and out? And I did have the thought that perhaps the staircase at one time there was an opening at the top. When I first found that pyramid, I was thinking, hey, this maybe helps with Frank's theory, but also explains mine of why wouldn't you just put the access point above the staircase, and maybe there was a ladder that went down to the staircase through the alluvial, and on top of it, this could have been part of a pillar or cap on something, some sort of stonework that was there originally. I don't know how much we buy into it, but there is the origination stories of the little people, ant people, and people came from the earth, the creation stories of the Navajo and Hopi of people, and generally people associate it with the Grand Canyon, but it does fit that. Now, there's another theory, and this one we didn't talk about much. We did touch upon it in the Chasing Legends when we did the rabbit hole videos. There was the story of Jacob Waltz, and the Pimas were working with him, and he was going and bringing food and things and salt, especially salt, to these people in some sort of cave or opening in these caves, and he was going down this tunnel, and they would reward him and give him gold, and that's where the Dutchman's gold came from. And it sounds really stupid, and kind of you wouldn't put that in a book, except, well, we do have a place where there's a pit that goes down to a spiral staircase that could lead to some sort of lava tube underground cavern or system. Okay, and that just still seems kind of ridiculous, but it is in a north-south trending canyon, and it is a pit associated with an adit down in the canyon a distance below. Okay, and there aren't any tailings or anything, so nobody would really find it by that, even though you can see the opening now. But it fits a lot of Dutchman clues, and that's kind of silly and stupid to even go there, till you also take into fact when Julia Thomas and Reinhardt and them first go in the mountains, one of the areas they're in the vicinity is in that vicinity. They were down near Hog Canyon, supposedly. When Jim Bark runs into them, they're out in that area, and he has them come out by the ranch. So now you have to look at, okay, well, that's where they were searching generally, and covering ground in there. So is it a possibility? I would really seriously doubt in any way that there are people that he was bringing salt to, or that's what should be associated with the Dutchman legend. But you can't ever just leave the box, take the boxes away. You have to keep them there. And the most likely one is a ceremonial and something for initiations or something with an indigenous people. And that gets tricky because you're dealing with, for one, the Hohokum, which almost nothing's known about. It's theoretical. It's like quantum physics and stuff, okay? It's like Schrodinger's cat, right? String theory. It's theoretical a lot of the time. So you're just kind of associating things and saying, okay, well, these people were known and named by the Pima as the people. That kind of disappeared. But the Pima's name is the people, and, you know, the Tohono O'odham or something, the people. The Apache are known as the people. The Navajo, the people. The Hopi are the peaceful people. But they all refer to themselves as people, the people, and then they just basically the people that came before us, and those people and that people. So the Hohokum, we have petroglyphs, and we have pottery, and we have certain elements we can look. And there are some ruins in the area. Now, the other thing that makes all this curious is when you look at the Hohokum occupation, there are some of the cliff dweller type situations, say in Rogers Canyon with the cliff ruins. You go, okay, they built some houses in Pueblo, okay, there. But then you go up to Garden Valley. Up in Garden Valley is very different. They're out in a big open spread area. The burials are right in there. The burials are actually, they were placed into the ground more in a sitting up kneeling position facing east, which is very Hopi-like. That area also was the Hohokum, and then later followed by the Mormon settlers, which tried to work in there. And then you would have Apache rancheros sometimes sitting. So you had all these groups stacked into the areas, and you're trying to sort that out. But you get to the southern end of the superstitions, we find more pit houses, We find a different type of structures, not the same structures we find on the northern end. And then we find crematory rock, where they were appears they cremated people. And a lot of the cremations from the Hohokum that they've found, because in the southern Arizona area, cremation was more popular. In the central and more northern areas with them, cremations happened, but they were not as popular. It was a much lower percentage. With the Aztecs, Mayans, those type of people, cremations were actually very affluent people. So you can kind of parallel them, but then they're always different in these areas. In the southern area, they did something also different. Generally, the Hohokum would have a pit and do the cremation in the pit. In this case, they were cremated, the ashes were gathered, put in an ola with a covered top, and then placed elsewhere in the mountains. We're not going to tell you where these areas are. You should leave these things alone. The Apache, on the other hand, would find an alcove or some place to put the person and their possessions that they could. They would also leave some possessions around if they didn't fit in the alcove and wall them up. Which is why if you start pulling something down and find bones, it's best to put it back, burn a little sage and get out of there. Leave it be for no other reason than be respectful. And if you find something in the area and you think it's an area where there was possibly a burial or something, it's just them leaving things. Just don't be collecting that type of stuff. I don't think it's not the hoodoo voodoo stuff associated with it as much as just be respectful. Sit there, look at it, realize, this is probably an area I shouldn't be messing with. This is someone's relative. I'm not messing with your grandma, don't mess with my grandma, that kind of thing. So we got these same similar groups, but they're associated and different. Some people get confused. While the Pima could have been descended from some of the Hohokum when they split up, we have to remember how huge and populated the Hohokum was, because they go down to the southern Arizona. But in that area, the Superstitions, we're looking from Casa Grande, obviously, quite a popular place, the Sacaton area, but all the way up into metropolitan Phoenix, which they dug canals. It was quite a huge group. Now, other people think, well, they're descended they were somehow descended or later came on to the Aztecs and Mayans, but they're in that time period, and there's been found shells and feathers and things that they believe they had trade routes that they traded with them. So the Hohokum might have been a very powerful, large group of people that traded with Aztecs and Mayans. They existed for a good 1,000-year period before they disappeared. And the Superstition enclaves would have been smaller groups that spread out through the mountains. Now, another thing we always have to remember is with these different groups and their stories get intermixed. And they talk about one another and the people that left. They can be very superstitious. The Apache didn't like to be around the dead. They would take someone who died, put their body where it is, rock it up, burn everything. Part of this was common sense for health, diseases, and so forth. But it was also they had their own superstitions. And then other cultures, I know there was one culture that said they would actually keep the body, and I can't remember who they were, but they actually kept their bodies with the family for a few weeks, and then they'd finally just kind of take it and bury it. And then every year on the anniversary of that person's either their birthday or their death day, they would dig them back up and have another party. To each their own. Sounds like an Irish wake, doesn't it? That was a bad St. Patrick's Day joke, wasn't it? But I'm Irish, so I can make that, right? It's not wrong if that's culturally your culture. I'm not appropriating it. Anyhow, good joke there, by the way. You know why the Irish used to bring the corpse, the body, the person being buried to the bar on the way to the funeral, on the way to burial? Because they had to bring him to the bar to see if he sobered up. So, in all cultures, but things can be so different, and even amongst ourselves with traditional cultures and so forth. So we do that, every group will say it associates with another group. And the odd thing is, even today, if you go up in the Navajo reservation, I'll have a friend that's Navajo, but they'll be married to a Maricopa. But I'll find someone that's a Hopi, and it doesn't seem like, since they're much more tight, less group that would marry out, they still will. And you'll find someone that's Tohono O'odham, or someone that's perhaps, Yavapai up there living with a family. It's very different, and I don't want to get into the whole cultural studies, but one of the things is with these groups is they realize you can't marry and interbreed too much within the families and the clans and the groups. It has to stay healthy and have healthy warriors and so forth like this. They would raid, take people, and people would they would raid and grab these young white women, and they would bring them in the tribe, raise them up, and have children with them. And it was actually part of that, just that healthy kind of way of reproducing and not creating problems within the group of just intermarrying too much. So that's why these cultures can be overlap and intercross and so forth and have very similar stories, because the marriages and as the groups would pass and so forth, these sorts of things would happen. So everybody follows that and understands that, even today. But we all do it. Our cultures do it because we've learned you don't marry within your own family. So it creates something problematic as well. Who's out there? Now, as we get into the next episode, that's what opens up all these possibilities, because, the U.S. government was involved in this and somehow. What was this? Well, how far does it go back? But at the time period, there's two groups that kind of got Frank and my head turned on this. One of them was the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Now, at this time period, there's a man we will go into a great deal about, James LeSueur. He's an archaeologist. He's a member of the Latter-day Saints. He's also a member of they're trying to bring in a temple into Mesa. And he brings in the hieroglyphic stone, which is known as the Mayan calendar stone. And we will go in depth to all that, so everybody will get their fill. So we had to look at that as he's an archaeologist. He believes in the lost tribes of Judah, which believes the Mayans or Aztecs would be somehow biblically connected, and with the Mormons. And so we have to take into account that in that time period, since this is when they say in the 20s and 30s, he could have been involved. So we have to definitely look into that to see the involvement and so forth. And you will find in episode 4, we will go through that in depth and detail. But the other group that kind of puzzled me and came up a few times peripherally was the Dons of Arizona, because the Dons of Arizona are formed in 1931. It's in that same time period. It's a group out of the Triangle Club. And the Dons of Arizona are just like the Masons Illuminati or something. They seem to be a public organization and doing good, but you have to also say it is a secret society, because there's a lot of comings and goings in these types of groups you don't necessarily know about. Now the Dons, everybody knows who were in the Dons and what Dons. Barry Goldwater, former senator, was a Don of Arizona. I believe Bob Corbin was involved with the Dons at one time. It was associated with a lot of businessmen and ranchers and people and from all walks of life and so forth. And I kind of looked at that and realized they had that interest in the Lost Dutchman Mine and the history of the Southwest in that area. And right around the corner, they decided to start their treks and so forth and their searches in the mountains. So was there a group of fundamental people? Now, I talked to Greg Davis about this. Was there a fundamental group that had these types of interests and would have? Fortunately, with Greg Davis, his uncle, Art Weber, was one of the people who helped organize and found the club back in 1930-31. And it's because of that, and Greg knew his uncle very well, and Greg became a Don much later on, he was able to kind of have a lot of the materials. Now, just to throw people off, is Greg Davis probably has single-handedly one of the largest personal private collections of the Lost Dutchman Mine in the Superstition Mountains. It's overwhelming to people to see it. He also has contributed a ton of stuff to the Historical Society. He's also the archivist for the Historical Society, so pile that on top. But even more so than all that, Greg has access to all these cabinets and material. Well, Trevor and I have looked at it. It's almost, I would say, a third of that collection, and you don't realize that it's like a house of a collection. A third of it is the Dons of Arizona. They've kept meticulous track of so many things, but you look through it and say if there was an organization that could have something like that in there. Now, we found no other evidence than people whispering. I've had people tell me for years, the Dons, there's a certain secret thing going on within the Dons. If there was, the last 20, 30 years or so, that is long gone, and those people are no longer associated. By the way, I am a Don of Arizona, and so is Frank. Which brings in that other weird connectivity, because people love connectivity, right? So Frank, who's a Mason, who believes he is a Templar, is also a Don of Arizona. And so Frank starts checking off those boxes as someone who would be interested in out there. He's not an archaeologist, but he was in the military. So we have to look at the connectivity between these groups and various people associated with things, and always follow through and fundamentally understand, why does this group seem, and what is this? And you got to keep that open mind. The stone maps were found south of there, so who knows, huh? And Travis Tumlinson had to drive by the site how many times? So there you go, is you're always looking at that. So was Jacob Waltz out there? He could have crossed by that area, but it is intriguing that the first Dutch hunters were right in that area searching for the Lost Dutchman Mine, fresh off of Jacob Waltz's telling them where to look for the mine. It's only later they go in the interior of Superstitions. An archaeologist from the Church of Latter-day Saints goes and grabs a petroglyph stone. He believes a Mayan calendar stone, and the association people have with the tunnels and so forth that the Mayans are Aztecs. Intriguing. But does one come from the other because of the connectivity if people tried to put the pieces together? So like I said, we will be hitting that. And that's where this will go. We'll be doing a very good way, showing you a way, and it's a bit exhaustive of how we've went through the process and researched and interviewed, and show you conclusively, we hope, the proof of just what things belong, what things don't. So I hope you're in for the ride. I hope you enjoy it. I know people have questions, and I'm trying to answer through the comments and do these on Mondays. So we kind of answer those as we work our way down through this. So we're 3 in, we got 9 to go. There's a bunch of little side trips. It's kind of like a rabbit hole thing as you're doing this. And there's a great payoff for it all. So, but the payoff is only as good as what you think. If you think me and Frank are going to be standing there at the end with a bunch of gold bars, well, you never know. So there you go. There you go. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It kind of gave you some insight, and you'll be able to follow along. Okay, get a notepad, start keeping track of all this stuff, because it is crazy. And we will get into associated some of the things that's happened, because there is the theory and things that refer to the hitchhiking syndrome, which means you bring things back with you, and it brings certain things with you. And we've noted that. So it became kind of an overall, it's a great history lesson, and you have to learn about these different groups and how they would have interacted and their fit into this situation and the area and culture of the learnings. I learned a lot of things I didn't know before by talking to people and saying, well, I need to know the background of this. I need to know the background of this person and why. And reading a lot of papers and stuff I wish I could get out of my head. But I went through the process to learn and understand, what were we dealing with? If we're dealing with this person, this situation, what's his mindset like? The psychology of what he was approaching it as. So I hope everybody enjoys it. I'm hoping by the end we'll get a few people cleared to say they want to do an interview and talk a little more freely on this on camera. Because it would be not necessarily interview style, but to get someone to come and just sit down for a minute and ask, bring out a few questions, have a few statements of what they saw. But in the end, there will be the payoffs of what we were able to do. So we're in the wilderness area, can only move so much. Yeah, I'd love to get an excavator in there and go to it. Without the archaeologist and the proper permitting and stuff, that's not going to happen. But maybe this spurs someone who's sitting there and just says, you know what, I'll take the academic risk. These guys got something pretty cool going on, and they've checked all the boxes. Let's get in there and do it. So maybe by the end we get that, and my name gets associated a little attached, way down the list somewhere, But there you go. Hope you're enjoying things. Hope everybody's having a great, wonderful week. Well, moving into the new week, hope you have a great week this week. So from now till then, till the next time we see you on Friday, hope everybody's well. Take care, and remember always, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this is Chasing Legends.